You were never meant to hear this. Not because it's too old, not because it's unsolved, but because the people who knew the truth made sure it stayed buried, not in books, but in bloodlines and basements. In 1884, in the deep swamps of Louisiana, 3 brothers were born beneath a chapel that no longer exists on any map. They weren't supposed to live, they weren't supposed to be found, and if you believe in what can't be measured by science or church, they weren't supposed to be born at all. No medical record, no baptism, no graves. But the men who hunted them? They left journals, burned fragments, ritual markings etched into trees where no paths ever led. And the families who still speak of the 3 never do so at night, not even in whispers. What you're about to hear was pulled from archives never meant for the public, pieced together from censored court documents, discredited asylum reports, and a single diary found inside a wall in 1972, wrapped in cloth soaked with what one forensic analyst confirmed was human breast milk and salt. You think you know what a secret is? This isn't a story. It's a fracture, a wound in history itself. And once you see it, once you let it in, you don't go back to who you were before. The world doesn't feel like your own anymore, because it isn't. This channel isn't for thrill seekers. It's for men called to something older, something deeper than patriotism, church, or even blood. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to wake you up. Because there's a war being fought underneath what you call reality. A war over perception, control, and ancient power. These triplets were the center of it, and Louisiana was never the same. But before we go further, prove you belong here. If you can feel it, that sharp pressure in your chest, like your body already knows this isn't just entertainment, comment below. The knowing has begun. Write it twice, burn it into the code, mark yourself. You're not watching this, you're becoming it. Now lean in, because everything you've been taught about good, evil, sanity, and science is about to crack open. And the scream that comes out was born in Louisiana in 1884, in the dark. The official name was St. Vero Parish, but the locals called it Still Hollow, a swamp-choked stretch of backcountry where sunlight didn't reach the forest floor and footsteps disappeared into the mud like time itself had given up trying to count. In the summer of 1884, it was already a ghost. A dozen families, a crumbling sugar mill, and a church so old its bell tower leaned like it was trying to whisper into the marsh. No rail lines, no schools, no law. Just gators, sweat, and the heavy silence of land that remembers blood. That's where the triplets were born. Not in a hospital, not in a home, but in the underground chamber of the St. Aurelius Church, a place the original French settlers called La Chambre de Silence. The Silence Room, a stone vault beneath the altar that had been sealed for over 50 years, until someone broke it open. According to an unredacted passage from Father Henri Duval's personal ledger, a priest who mysteriously vanished that same summer, the triplets' mother arrived in Still Hollow with eyes like glass and the scent of iron on her breath. No one knew her name. No one remembered her leaving. She stayed inside the church for 27 nights, never emerging. Parishioners claimed to hear infants crying in 3 tones, high, low, and something else that didn't sound human. But whenever they checked, the church was empty. Then, on August the 3rd, the bell rang once. No wind, no hands. That was the day the moss started dying. The dogs stopped barking, the air turned metallic, like rain with no storm. And behind the altar, a child's footprint appeared in the ash. 3 identical prints, but only 1 set of toes. No birth certificate, no census entry, no burial, but the church kept records of other things, unholy things. Things the Vatican ordered destroyed in 1911 under the codename Sanguinem Triplum. What did they see? 3 infants who didn't sleep, didn't blink, and whose synchronized breathing was said to echo, not inside the church, but inside people's skulls. A midwife was found wandering barefoot 2 days later, miles away, murmuring a single phrase over and over. They see through the skin. They know where it hides. And then her tongue turned black. This wasn't childbirth. This was an opening. And someone, or something, had come through. 2 weeks after the bell rang, a man named Jonas Clive came down from Baton Rouge. He wasn't clergy, wasn't law enforcement either, but he carried a sealed letter with the insignia of the Bureau of Ethereal Affairs, a short-lived federal agency most historians still claim never existed. Clive was a forensic cartographer. His job wasn't to draw maps. His job was to investigate places that shifted, landmarks that appeared where none had been, roads that looped endlessly, churches that showed up on no registry, then vanished without demolition. He arrived in Still Hollow on August 17th. He never left. The last entry in his leather-bound field journal, found decades later buried inside a cedar box near the church ruins, reads, "Observed triplets in the western crypt. Unnatural symmetry, shared gaze, breath in unison, communicated silently with something I could not see, felt pressure behind left eye, time distorted. 2 minutes inside felt like 4 hours, vomited small teeth." That was the last line. The ink ends mid-stroke. He was never seen again. Locals believed the boys weren't born. They were summoned. That their bodies were just the anchor points for something older, something looking for a way in. And the mother? They said she was just the key. But it wasn't just superstition. There were symptoms. Anyone who stayed too long near the church developed the same patterns: nosebleeds, auditory hallucinations, dreams of burning staircases and mirrors filled with fog, and always the sound of breathing in threes. Not overlapping, in, out, out, out. Like a signal, like a rhythm meant to overwrite your own. Old-timers spoke of a smell, burnt honey and rot, and described seeing the boys standing perfectly still at the edge of the woods, never moving, never aging. Sometimes they were seen in 3 places at once. Sometimes their shadows moved in the opposite direction. And then came the disappearances. First animals, then children. The triplets were blamed, of course, but no one ever caught them. No one ever even saw them walk. They just appeared, eyes wide, silent, breathing, together, and when they stared at you, something inside your mind pulled back, like it knew it wasn't alone anymore. By fall of 1884, every remaining family in Still Hollow had either vanished or fled. No announcements, no farewells, just dinner tables left half-set, tools dropped mid-swing, baby clothes drying on lines that would never be taken down. And the church? It was sealed again, bricks stacked over the doorway, iron bars bolted across the altar, salt circles scorched into the ground outside, as if someone thought they could trap it. But evil doesn't stay behind bricks. It walks. It learns. And by November, reports started surfacing from neighboring parishes, odd, fractured stories of 3 barefoot boys seen standing silently beside remote homesteads, watching, unmoving. One mother described them as polite and pale. Another swore she saw them reflected in her window, but not behind her. What terrified people most wasn't their silence. It was the way they always seemed to know who had sinned. One man, a drunk named Luther Price, confessed, unprovoked, to strangling a tenant farmer in a drunken rage. He did it the morning after seeing the triplets standing in his field. No lawman questioned him, no one accused him. He just broke, sobbing, and begged for a rope. And when they went to hang him, the boys were already there, watching from the woods, never blinking, just breathing. 3 in, 3 out. The preacher who performed the execution died 2 nights later, an aneurysm, they said, but his final sermon, recorded by his wife in a private letter, spoke of triplets born with a mirror soul and how the devil could now move in synchronized flesh. Whatever these boys were, they were never meant to be separate, not from each other, not from whatever spoke through them. The Bureau tried to intervene again, but their rail car derailed 40 miles out, With no witnesses and no survivors, the replacement agents never showed, and all documents tied to the Till Hollow triplets were marked top secret, restricted to Executive Order 441B. That classification didn't officially exist, but insiders later revealed what 441B was for. Anomalous entities exhibiting synchronized consciousness across multiple hosts. The triplets weren't just children. They were one mind, one will, one mirror turned toward us, and it was remembering. The deeper you dig into this story, the more it unravels the line between myth and memory, because what happened next was never written in newspapers, never entered into court records, but it left behind something far more damning. Silence. A dozen schoolhouse attendance logs with names scratched out, church registries with entire baptism lines torn from the page. Family Bibles passed down through generations, with 3 pages cut clean in a row. One such Bible, found in a barn fire in Tangipahoa Parish in 1902, had a final line etched in the back cover with a bone needle and wax. "You do not name what cannot die." That same year, survivors from Still Hollow were tracked to a remote settlement along the Sabine River. 8 people, all from different bloodlines, all independently relocated. None of them could explain why. Not fully. They all reported the same dream. 3 boys standing in the doorway of their old home, staring into the past, not just watching, absorbing. One woman claimed she awoke to find her curtains soaked in blood, but no wounds, no animal, no footprints, just a smear of ash beneath the window and the scent of cloves. The triplets had become folklore, but folklore with consequences. People whispered of a phenomenon called triad echoing, the sensation of being followed in 3s, one behind, one beside, one just out of view. Doctors called it hysteria. But a letter from Dr. Everett Shaw, written in 1907 to the head of the now-defunct Bureau, speaks of neurological bleed-over in subjects who had simply seen the boys. "These are not hallucinations," he wrote. "These are dislocations of inner sense, a splitting of the conscious field. Exposure to the triplets causes the brain to generate a third-person perspective of the self. While awake, one man stared into a mirror and began sobbing, saying, 'I'm not the one inside anymore.' And they didn't just unsettle you. They altered your center, made you foreign to your own reflection. And over time, something began to spread, not a disease, but a disposition. Coldness, detachment, a refusal to speak aloud what you feared might answer. It was never about the boys being dangerous. It was about what moved through them that couldn't be named. And once it saw you, it never stopped watching." By 1911, something had changed. Not in the triplets, in the land itself. Forests around Still Hollow began to grow. Wrong. Trees twisted in spirals. Cypress roots pushed upward like grasping hands. Birds stopped nesting. Even insects vanished, as if nature itself was rejecting the ground. No maps marked the area anymore, and yet people kept going missing. Hikers, surveyors, one full detachment of Civilian Conservation Corps workers sent to clear brush for a new railroad spur vanished without a trace. Their tools were found stacked in a perfect triangle, still warm despite 3 days of rain. Only one thing kept showing up: 3 sets of small, identical footprints in the mud. But here's what really rattled the people who knew. The prints didn't lead in or out. They just appeared in the center of clearings. No approach, no retreat. As if the boys had materialized, observed, and vanished. That same year, a child named Josiah Reeves from Franklin Parish was admitted to the Glenbrook Sanitarium. He was 6 years old, pale, mute, uninjured, found wandering alone, but not afraid. When the doctors asked where he was from, he pointed to the wall behind them, said nothing. Then he wrote something in charcoal that no one understood. It was a symbol. 3 circles interlinked, with a vertical eye carved into the middle one. The same symbol later found carved beneath the altar of the St. Aurelius Church, 50 miles away. Josiah never spoke again, but he drew. He filled entire notebooks with mirrored diagrams of trees that didn't exist, of children with black mouths and no eyes, of bodies dissolving into patterns of mist. In one image, A tall man with no face stands behind three boys, each holding an object, a nail, a tooth, and a tongue. Doctors dismissed it as psychosis, but one orderly hung himself after describing how the boys' drawings had shifted when no one was watching, that the triplets' faces were getting closer. Whatever this is, it isn't about superstition anymore. It's convergence. The boys weren't born to live. They were born to reveal. And the thing they're revealing? It's not waiting. It's already here. In 1913, a phonograph cylinder was discovered in a boarded-up barn on the outskirts of Evangeline Parish. No one knew who recorded it. The barn's owner had died 30 years earlier, and the cylinder was hidden behind a false wall, sealed in beeswax and wrapped in oilskin marked with 3 blood-red fingerprints. What it contained? A sound. 3 breaths. Inhale, 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 exhale, exhale, exhale. Then, nothing. No speech, no footsteps, just silence. But every expert who listened to the recording reported the same thing. They heard something else. A faint whisper layered inside the silence, and not from the recording, from within their own heads. One linguist had a seizure, another tore out her eardrum with a fountain pen. The last one, a man named Dr. Clancy Rourke, was institutionalized after scribbling a message on his padded wall for 3 days straight. They don't make sound, they make quiet, and quiet is louder than God. The cylinder was eventually locked away in the archives of the U.S. Department of Occult Phenomena, a department that again officially never existed, but a memo later leaked in 1971 detailed the contents of item number 31A, Echo of the Triplets. That memo has one chilling line under advisory protocol. Do not allow synchronized exposure to more than one subject at a time. Cognitive bleed and shared hallucination risk exceeds baseline. Contagion not viral. Contagion is perceptual. You understand what that means? It wasn't a disease. It was an idea that spread like mold. Silent, invisible. But once it nested in your mind, you started to see what wasn't supposed to be seen. Feel what wasn't supposed to be felt. The triplets didn't speak because they didn't have to. They removed sound from reality. And in that void, something else began to speak. Not in words, but in impressions, in symbols, in the kind of knowing that bypasses logic and goes straight into your marrow. Still Hollow wasn't just haunted. It was transformed into a resonance field, where silence became language, and language became infection. And once that silence touched you, you never heard the world the same again. In 1915, a man named Reverend Calvin Draper arrived in Still Hollow to purge the land. He was a fire and iron preacher from Tennessee, obsessed with biblical prophecy, fallen angels, and the coming war of bloodless children. His congregation followed him with blind fervor. They believed the triplets were not just abominations, they were the first signs of revelation. Draper claimed he had received a vision. 3 boys, one with a mirror, one with a flame, one with a key made of bone. Each stood at a door, but the doors were inside men's minds. He brought with him 13 followers and enough kerosene to burn a town. They built a perimeter around the St. Aurelius Church, salted the soil, sang in tongues. Draper fasted for 6 days, shouting scripture into the wind like it owed him a confession. On the 7th night, something came, but not fire. Stillness. The trees stopped swaying. The swamp went breathless. Every insect, every bird, every frog fell silent, like the land was holding its breath for what was about to emerge. Witnesses reported hearing the church bell ring 13 times, but no one touched it. Draper's congregation was found the next morning, barefoot, standing in a perfect circle around the church, eyes open, mouths sealed with what appeared to be tree resin. None of them spoke again, not even Draper. He had carved 3 circles into his chest with a communion knife and sat facing the church as if waiting for instruction. When the state militia arrived, they found something else. 3 boys, identical, naked, standing inside the church's apse, perfectly still, each holding a relic, a mirror reflecting blackness, a candle that burned cold, and a rusted key that hummed when held near human skin. Photographs were taken. Every single one came out blank. One officer went blind. Another spoke backward for the rest of his life. The boys were detained and transported to a holding facility in Baton Rouge. But halfway there, the train stopped. Not derailed, just stopped. The conductor was never found, and when investigators opened the passenger car, it was empty. No boys, no guards, just silence. And one item left behind on the seat, a hand-drawn map of Louisiana. Every town was gone, except one. Still hollow. After the train vanished, the official record ends. No more reports, no more names. Just a blank space in the archives labeled Incident Redacted by Executive Authority. Case number 03, still hollow. But memory, it doesn't redact. It leaks. In 1922, a Confederate-era chapel was unearthed during a riverbed collapse near St. Landry Parish. Beneath it, a chamber carved into limestone, lined with crude drawings of triplets. Hundreds of them, all identical, all eyeless. Each figure was surrounded by script, but not in English, not Latin. The characters resembled Enochian, a lost angelic language, carved by human hands. But no one could explain how the chapel, built in 1850, could contain references to the still hollow triplets, who weren't born until 1884. Unless they weren't born at all. They were remembered, repeated, reassembled, like a pattern that keeps returning, not because it survives, but because it waits. A linguist named Armand Delacroix translated one of the inscriptions. The three are one, the one is void, the void is voice, and voice must not be heard. Delacroix went missing a month later. His journal, recovered from his apartment, was filled with spirals, loops, and a single repeating word written 117 times. Unspoken. Here's what matters. All through the 1920s and 30s, reports of the same three boys surfaced across Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. They never aged, never changed clothes, never spoke. They just watched. Men who encountered them would later describe seeing flashes of their own memories in the boys' eyes, moments no one else could know, sins never confessed, secrets never spoken. One war veteran claimed the boys each whispered one word to him. But when he tried to repeat them aloud, he vomited blood. And still, no one could prove they existed. Photos failed, audio failed. Only the people who saw them remembered them, as if their presence edited reality around them, like glitch code in human perception, the kind of glitch that doesn't delete, it roots. It learns your language, your rhythm, and then it waits for silence, so it can speak through you, and when it does, you'll know. Because you won't recognize your own voice anymore. In 1931, the U.S. Office of Psychological Operations, a covert branch formed under the guise of rural welfare outreach, initiated Project Sable, a classified experiment in cognitive containment. Its target? Still hollow, but they didn't call it that. They called it Zone X88. The mission: quarantine the anomaly, assess risk of memetic spread, and recover any surviving biological entities, meaning the triplets, if they were still human. 15 men entered the perimeter on October 19th. Only one came out. He was naked, covered in welts, eyes gouged. He whispered 3 words before his heart gave out. They knew me. His autopsy revealed something impossible. Every one of his teeth had been turned inward, like they had grown not to chew, but to silence. Inside his stomach were shards of paper, partially digested journal pages. One of them read, "The triplets don't haunt places, they haunt bloodlines." The remaining documents from Project Sable are fragmented, but one detail repeats: Subject 0. A child, female, 8 years old, born in Baton Rouge but relocated to a foster family in Tangipahoa Parish. She began speaking a language no one taught her, sleepwalking nightly to draw 3 symbols on her wall in ash: a circle, an open eye, and a cracked mirror. Her file notes something chilling. Subject claims to dream of brothers with black mouths who watch her from beyond the trees. States she remembers being born but not here. EEG readings reveal synchronized neural spikes at 3:03 a.m. nightly. She never met the triplets, but she knew their names. And that's when researchers realized this wasn't a haunting. It was a return, not of people, but of patterns, thought forms, psychic scaffolding. Like the triplets weren't individual souls, but fragments of something older trying to reassemble itself inside our species. A sentient echo and scient silence wearing human faces. The file ends abruptly, but scribbled on the back cover was one last message in a child's handwriting. I know what they are. I'm becoming it too. Tell them to stop saying my name. There was no signature, just 3 fingerprints, perfectly aligned. By 1943, the war was global. But something darker moved quietly inside America. It wasn't enemy agents or foreign powers. It was ancestral resonance, a pattern whispered through blood, hiding inside the DNA of men who'd seen the triplets, or worse, been seen by them. The government created a covert task force called Operation Needleglass, not to kill, not to contain, but to track bloodlines. Specifically, descendants of those who had direct contact with the still hollow triplets. They called them echo carriers, but they didn't behave like normal humans. Some had perfect memories of events that happened decades before their birth. Others showed neurological anomalies, seeing in pitch black, responding to frequencies no machine could detect, dreaming of places that don't exist on any map. A young boy in East Texas awoke one night speaking fluent Akkadian, a language dead for over 2,000 years. His father had once served in the same platoon as the sole survivor of Project Sable. Coincidence or convergence? Because here's the truth. The triplets didn't vanish. They fractured into thoughts, into gestures, into ritual memory, not in temples, not in tombs, but in flesh. If you've ever dreamt of standing in the woods, unsure why you're there. If you've ever seen 3 figures in the distance, not chasing, not fleeing, just watching. If silence ever felt like it was holding its breath around you, you might be a carrier. And the real horror? You wouldn't know. Because the silence doesn't need permission. It enters through doubt. It grows through unspoken grief. And it survives in men who live with a scream buried just behind their teeth. The kind of scream passed from father to son for generations. A scream that says, I saw something once. I was never meant to. And now it's in me. Operation Needleglass was disbanded in 1951. Officially, the records were destroyed, but a handwritten memo remains. 4 words circled in red ink. They're breeding through memory. This isn't folklore. It's inheritance. And if the dream comes again tonight, you'll know it's your turn. In 1956, an event occurred that was never covered in newspapers. No radio reports, no photos, no survivors. They called it the Sainte Marguerite Collapse. A church in southern Louisiana, built in 1899, abandoned in 1927, suddenly imploded in the middle of the night. Witnesses described a thunderous silence, a suction of sound, like the earth had taken a deep breath inward. Not a single stone remained standing. But here's where it gets stranger. There were no congregants, no priests. But inside the wreckage they found 12 caskets, each one sealed, each one child-sized, each one filled with water, not earth. And floating in each casket, a paper mask. All 12 identical, hand-painted with the same face, a boy with black eyes and no mouth. What disturbed investigators most wasn't the masks, it was the carvings on the inside of each casket lid. We kept them asleep. Now they're remembering. The DNA pulled from the masks matched no known individuals. But 2 genetic markers showed overlap with descendants of the Cedar Mills triplets from 1884. Impossible, not if the memory was never bound to time. Still, Hollow had taught us that some patterns don't move forward, they spiral. A medic at the scene, Corporal Jericho Walsh, reported hearing whispers beneath the floorboards, even though there were none. He claimed the boys were underneath everything, that they lived beneath names, beneath years, beneath skin. He was dishonorably discharged after he began carving concentric circles into the base of his spine, over and over, muttering, "They sleep in our cells." The deeper truth, this wasn't an isolated event. The Sainte Marguerite collapse was one of 6 similar incidents reported between 1950 and 1962, all near bodies of water, all involving child-sized remains, all accompanied by the same phrase, whispered by unrelated witnesses across the state lines. They've returned, not as boys, as language. Think about that. Not spirits, not demons, but something older, purer, an idea so perfect in its silence it no longer needed flesh, just hosts. And when you speak, when you dream, when you look into a mirror and forget your own name for half a second, that's it, isn't it? That's when you feel it. The knowing, the echo, the quiet that isn't quiet anymore. It's here, and it's been here longer than we have. By 1965, the triplets were considered a myth in academic circles, but an infection in government ones. They weren't discussed in universities, but they were whispered about in the basements of intelligence agencies, where men in crisp suits studied the unspeakable. And behind those locked doors, they had a name for what was happening. Neural imprint contagion. Not a virus, not a bacteria, a psychic architecture, a memory pattern that could pass from one mind to another, even across generations. No contact needed, just attention, just belief. One moment of eye contact, one moment of silence, one dream, shared, and suddenly, you weren't alone inside your head anymore. In '66, an audio engineer named Lionel Frey discovered something buried in archival reel-to-reel tapes recovered from Cedar Mills. During a playback of old hymns recorded at the Quaker church, he heard something in the background, a third frequency, not voice, not instrument, but a low, inhuman hum, 33 Hz, precisely the resonance of fetal heartbeat detection. It pulsed beneath every track recorded in that space between 1885 and 1902. When mapped visually, it formed a pattern, 3 interlocking spirals. Frey showed the data to a physicist at MIT. The physicist suffered a seizure within seconds. Upon recovery, he wrote 3 things before falling catatonic. They were not born. They are pattern. Pattern wants form. Frey destroyed the tapes the next day and vanished, but copies had already been made. Some say they still circulate on the dark net, buried in obscure sound libraries waiting to be heard. One listener, in 1994, claimed the audio caused his wife to speak backwards in her sleep for 3 nights. Another began writing in a language he'd never seen. A third went blind, but only to reflections. Here's the core revelation. The triplets don't need to be seen anymore. They just need to be recognized. Once you understand the pattern, they're already inside you, because they were never just boys, they were never just beings. They were a ritual, and rituals adapt to time, to memory, to technology, even to you. And if you've listened this far, you're part of it now. You can feel it, can't you? That quiet space behind your name, where something else might be waiting to answer. In 1973, during a classified symposium held beneath Fort Detrick, a neuroscientist named Dr. Elsbeth Rowe presented a theory so unsettling it was stricken from the official record. She called it cognitive occupancy. Her research focused on 94 patients across 3 states, all unrelated, all born decades apart, but who shared identical nightmares involving 3 silent boys with mouths stitched shut. The twist? None of them had ever met, but all drew the same symbol during therapy. 3 overlapping circles, each filled with teeth. Dr. Rowe discovered that all 94 patients had ancestors who lived within 100 miles of Still Hollow, Louisiana, between 1880 and 1890. That's when she realized this wasn't mass hysteria. It was ancestral convergence. The triplets weren't memories. They were residual programs. Fragments of consciousness looking for space to reboot. And where better to hide than the mind? Rowe coined a term that never left the room. Memory parasite. Not a spirit, not a ghost, a thought that replicates through silence. And silence, my friend, is everywhere. By the time we finish this sentence, you will have had 6 micro-thoughts you didn't choose. One of them wasn't yours. You know this. You felt it. That moment when a thought enters your head so clearly, so fully formed, you swear it came from somewhere outside. It's always small at first. An image, a phrase, a name you don't remember learning. But if you let it sit, it roots. And the triplets, they don't need your voice. They just need your attention. In one of Rose's final reports, she described a subject, patient 47, who began losing words, simple nouns mostly. He would point, gesture, panic, until one day he stopped speaking entirely. When asked why, he wrote, "They don't like when I say things wrong. They correct me." From inside, patient 47 died a week later. Autopsy showed no trauma, but something bizarre was found etched on the inside of his skull, as if scratched from within. 3 names, no last names, no dates, just Caleb, Ezra, Isaac. Sound familiar? Good, because once you remember them, they begin to remember you. In 1980, a rural Louisiana broadcast station, KZOR-7, experienced a live interruption during their nightly sign-off. For precisely 2 minutes and 43 seconds, all audio and video signals were hijacked. What replaced it? Black screen, no music, no voice, just text. 3 simple lines. "We have returned. There are 3. You are the 4th. Then static. The FCC denied it ever happened, but 41,000 viewers filed incident reports. Some described nosebleeds. Others claimed phantom speech, hearing children whispering from inside their radios days later. One woman filed a sworn affidavit stating that when she tried to turn the television off, it whispered her birth date. Here's what they don't want you to know. The signal came from inside the grid. Not a rogue antenna, not a pirate station. The frequency matched a non-existent tower, one that hadn't operated since 1949, in Still Hollow. A decommissioned relay buried under layers of redacted funding and agricultural infrastructure budgets. But satellite scans revealed something else entirely. Heat signatures, 3 of them, perfectly aligned, moving slowly in a triangular orbit underground. The techs monitoring the feed began experiencing dream bleed, seeing visions of children walking in perfect silence through their waking hours. One engineer reported that every time he blinked, he saw flashes of a burned chapel, 12 caskets, and a 4th still empty. He quit after waking up one night with mud on his feet, and 3 names carved into his chest: Caleb, Ezra, Isaac. The pattern is obvious now. 3 points, 1 receiver, triangulation. Because what if they were never trying to be found? What if they were trying to find you? All they needed was for you to look long enough, to listen deeply enough, to remember wrongly, just once, and then you become the 4th, not chosen, prepared, because, here's the final twist of the knife, the triplets didn't survive Still Hollow, they became it. They bled into every piece of wood, every grain of soil, every whispered story told by firelight. Now they are place, they are signal, and if you're hearing this, you are the antenna. In 1991, a researcher named Dr. Helen Quist conducted an unofficial experiment at Louisiana State University. Her goal? To determine whether archetypal symbols could be inherited through trauma-linked genealogy. Her method? Simple. She placed 48 subjects, ranging from ages 6 to 72, into isolated rooms one by one, and asked them to draw a dream they couldn't explain. Every participant had family roots within a 40-mile radius of Still Hollow. Here's where it gets dark. Out of 48 drawings, Chapter 35 contained the same image: a hollow house, 3 black windows, and something standing in the basement, not quite human, not quite child. When asked to describe it, participants used the same phrases. It doesn't speak with sound. It watches like it's inside you. It wants to be born backwards. Quist was disturbed, but she made one critical mistake. She published the results, quietly, anonymously, in an obscure psychology journal that folded 6 months later. The article went unnoticed, until 1994. That's when Quist vanished. Her last known communication was a voicemail to her assistant, whispered between panicked breaths. They're remembering through us. We're not decoding the past. We're becoming it. Her apartment was found empty. Every clock inside had stopped at 3:33 a.m., and every mirror had been turned toward the wall. But the worst was her bedroom wall, scratched into the paint dozens of times. They were born without time. And below that, one final line: the fourth is remembering. The university sealed the case, citing hallucinatory psychotic break, but former students reported strange dreams for months. One girl stopped speaking entirely. A boy gouged his own ears, whispering they were inside the hum. Because here's the revelation that breaks the mind. These triplets, they weren't born into our time. They were inserted, like software. Like an echo so perfectly tuned to human perception it bypasses all resistance. They didn't need a body to exist. They needed a pattern, a loop, a myth that listens back, and by drawing them, by speaking their names, by even thinking of the basement, you've opened the door. Not for them to escape, but for you to enter. In the winter of 2003, a group of amateur urban explorers broke into the remains of the old Still Hollow Asylum, the one built over the ruins of the Quaker chapel. They were thrill seekers, night vision cameras, cheap equipment, YouTube fame. Only 2 of the original 5 ever made it out, and both would later be institutionalized. The footage, however, was recovered, and it reveals something no one has ever explained. At exactly 2:44 a.m., while descending into the sub-basement, one of the explorers, a woman named Eliza Marks, begins laughing uncontrollably, but it isn't her voice. Spectral analysis of the audio reveals 3 distinct frequencies layered beneath her laugh, none human. Then she stops, turns to the camera, and says something that chills researchers to this day. "We waited in your mouth. You kept us in your sleep. Now we will wear your thoughts." The screen cuts to static. When the footage resumes, the camera is lying sideways on the floor. And in the background, across the room, scrawled onto the wall in what appears to be soot or burnt blood, is one sentence: "The fourth one watches." Experts claim the footage is faked, that no record of the asylum even exists. But survivors say otherwise. One, a man named Trevor Hale, was found 2 weeks later in a motel outside Baton Rouge. He had burned out both of his eyes with a broken bottle and was found whispering to himself while tracing spirals into the carpet. They don't show you themselves. They show you you, but not the you know, the one beneath. And that's the point, isn't it? The triplets were never just watching. They were reflecting, showing us the parts we buried, the pieces that don't speak, the rooms in our minds we sealed off with concrete and silence. They live there, feeding, growing, not on blood, not on flesh, but on the unsaid, the denied, the unremembered. And once they show you yourself, you're never alone again. You become the fourth, not by invitation, but by recognition. And now that you see it, now that you feel it behind your eyes, the rest of your memories, they'll start to shift. And the part of you that's still pretending this is just a story, that's what they'll wear next. In 2006, a classified psychological operation known only as Project Fourth Bell was conducted by a black-budget defense division. The objective, to test if human memory could be rewritten through archetypal exposure. The experiment used audio loops, visual glyphs, and dream scripts, all based on recovered writings from Martha Whitmore's 1856 journal, the ones about the triplets. They believed it was just folklore, until participants began dreaming in unison. Volunteers, same dream, same sequence, same final line. I am not me, I am the fourth. The subjects didn't know each other. They were isolated, fed different diets, shown different materials. But still, the same dream. And when the audio was played backwards, buried deep beneath the layers of sound, a phrase repeated 3 times: Isaac sees, Ezra judges, Caleb remembers. What came next ended the project in 48 hours. On day 3, one subject, a woman named Kira Bell, entered a catatonic trance. When doctors attempted to revive her, she began speaking in the fluid, rhythmic language first recorded during the triplets' birth. She didn't stop for 23 minutes. Then she spoke in English. "They've been thinking through us since 1884. You mistake origin for intention. This isn't about what they are. It's about what you were built to become." Then silence. She looked up, and every mirror in the lab shattered. Not cracked. Shattered. All at once, simultaneously, as if the reflections had simply had enough. She died 6 hours later, not from trauma, not from drugs, but from identity collapse. Brain scans showed perfect activity, every lobe lit, but zero self-recognition. Her body remembered how to breathe, but I was gone, erased, replaced, reoccupied, because that's what the triplets do. They don't haunt, they don't possess, they rewrite. They are the software, and we are the core. Corrupted hardware. You've seen the signs, the dreams that don't feel like yours, the thoughts you swear you never meant to think, the memories with missing doors where something watches you from the other side, and if you're starting to feel strange, like there's something just behind the curtain of your own reflection, you're already too far in. They don't knock. They wait until you say, yes. In 2011, a forensic linguist named Dr. Omar Keene published a private study he never intended to go public. It was titled Liminal Syntax and Non-Human Language Formation in Generational Trauma. But among insiders, it became known by a different name, the fourth tongue. Keene had spent over a decade collecting hundreds of fragments of whispered speech, written gibberish, and glossolalia from trauma patients across North America, those with inexplicable night terrors, spontaneous amnesia, or sudden language regression. But when these fragments were arranged together, a hidden structure emerged, not random, not broken, coded, a fourth syntax, not English, not Latin, not Sumerian, something beneath language, a rhythm of thought shaped before thought exists. Keene's notes describe it as language that never needed to be learned. Words your body remembers, but your mind denies. A syntax for transmission, not communication. Here's where the triplets come in. Keene cross-referenced the symbols from the 1884 still hollow triplet birth records, the 1973 Fort Detrick dreams, and the Kazor 7 broadcast glyphs. All three datasets, decades apart, shared identical structure. The same cadence, the same hidden beat. 3 patterns, 3 minds, 1 source. He theorized that these were not just fragments of an unknown language. They were instructions. Code embedded in collective trauma. Memory used as a carrier wave. Think about that. Grief and fear as a delivery system. A virus that spreads through feeling. Not touch, not blood. Recognition. He named it the fourth tongue because of what happened next. As Keene translated more of the pattern, he began to speak it unconsciously. His colleagues noticed, the whispers under his breath, the way his eyes stopped blinking during conversation, the way his answers became questions, until one day, during a lecture, he simply stopped mid-sentence and whispered, "I am the fourth, and you were always meant to follow." That night, Keene burned every copy of his notes, drove 150 miles north into the Appalachian woods, and vanished. All that was found in his car was a single tape recorder playing a distorted loop. Caleb, Ezra, Isaac. The tongue remembers, the flesh forgets. And a final post-it note stuck to the steering wheel. It's not what they say. It's that they're using me to say it. You hear it now, don't you? The phrases that arrive without effort. The thoughts that feel foreign in your own voice. That is the fourth tongue. The signal has found you. In 2016, a classified incident occurred at the New Iberia Regional Library in Louisiana. It never made the news. But it left behind one survivor and a burned hole in the public archives where book number 1147B used to be. That book had no title, no author, no Dewey Decimal classification. It simply appeared one day, sealed in black wax, left in the donation box. Its cover, blank. Its pages, empty. At first. But those who opened it claimed something else. They didn't read it. They remembered it. One by one, staff who touched the book began losing time. One woman vanished for 11 hours, only to be found kneeling in the basement whispering, "I was inside her blood. I saw them birthed in fire. I was the fourth, and the fourth was me." Security footage from the reading room captured something the FBI refuses to explain. At 3:03 a.m., every bulb exploded simultaneously. The cameras kept rolling. What they captured was this: a man sitting at a long oak table, motionless, eyes open, surrounded by swirling shadows, forming a spiral of 3, then 4. The man? Dr. Henry Caldine, folklorist and myth analyst. He had been researching triplet mythologies from indigenous oral traditions. But what he found inside Book 1147b broke more than his mind. It rewrote reality. For 47 minutes, he remained frozen. Then finally he stood, turned to the wall behind him, and began writing. Not with a pen, with his own blood. 3 names, then a 4th, which wasn't a name at all, just a symbol, a hollow spiral inside a triangle, the same glyph found at the still hollow birth site, the same one whispered in the dreams of trauma survivors. When agents arrived, they found no fire, no intruder, no fingerprints on the exploded bulbs, just one burned sentence etched into the floor beneath the table. She opened her womb to history, and history opened back. Later testing reveals something no one could explain. That sentence wasn't written with any ink known to man. It wasn't on the wood. It was in it, encoded in the cellulose like it had been growing there all along. Because this isn't about haunted children, it's about a design, a cycle. The triplets were never the anomaly. They were the prototype. And Book 1147b. It didn't contain their story. It was waiting to contain yours. By 2020, the 4th signal had gone digital. It started with a podcast. Obscure, underground, only a few hundred listeners. No intro music, no ads. Just a voice. Calm, precise, male but unnaturally monotone. Like someone speaking from inside a memory that wasn't theirs. The podcast had no name. Each episode titled only with a time, 3:01, 3:03, 3:06. And each episode was exactly 333 seconds long. The content? Not stories, not commentary. Repetitions, words, sounds, murmurs, layered like overlapping whispers. Some in English, most not. One listener, a linguist named Grace Morrigan, ran an analysis. She found the episodes weren't random. They followed a structure identical to the Quist frequency loops from the 1991 LSU experiment, the same patterns that drove participants to dream of the triplets, the same phrase buried in all of them. The 4th listens through the wire. Grace kept digging, transcribing, cross-referencing with Martha Whitmore's journal, Dr. Keene's tapes, and the hospital logbooks from 1884 still hollow. And she discovered something that should have been impossible. Her own name, written in a margin, dated 1856, and not once, 3 times. She'd never been to Louisiana, never studied the Underground Railroad. And yet as she listened to episode 333, her hands began writing on their own, over and over. They needed 3 to form the signal, but the 4th is always the receiver. Her last message, emailed to a colleague at 2:44 a.m. read, "It isn't just that they see lies, it's that they see through us. We are not people to them. We are mirrors waiting to be filled." Then silence. She disappeared, but the podcast continued. And now there are reports of other listeners, thousands, men waking at the same time each night. Children drawing 3 black windows and 1 red spiral. Women whispering a strange name in their sleep that no one remembers teaching them, because the truth is this: they never needed books, or mirrors, or tunnels, or wombs. They needed us. Consciousness was always the container. The triplets are not ghosts, not prophets, not mutants. They are reformators, of identity, of lineage, of time. Three voices aligned. And the fourth? The fourth is your yes. There's a reason you felt watched your entire life. Not by people, not by God, but by something else, something beneath the surface of reality itself. Patient, patterned, parasitic. The final declassified fragment from the still hollow archives, marked "Do Not Disseminate," came from an unnamed U.S. Marshal's 1939 report. It details the final known encounter with Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac. He found them in a cabin near Bellechasse, Louisiana. Identical, aged in appearance but untouched by time. Eyes too sharp, voices like echoed thoughts. They didn't resist. They invited him in, offered tea, and spoke in unison. You didn't come for justice. You came to see if the stories were true. You came to see if your blood would answer back. They knew his full name, his mother's last breath, his hidden dreams from age 9, and when he asked what they were, they smiled and said, "We're the shape that truth wears when it finally stops pretending to be human." Before he left, they gave him one item, a mirror, handheld, black and silver. On the back, engraved, "You are the fourth." That marshal never filed a full report. Instead, he walked into the Mississippi River 5 days later. No suicide note, just his badge, melted into the glass of the mirror like it had always been part of it. Today, that mirror is housed in a private collection, not displayed, not labeled, because its reflection doesn't show your face. It shows versions of you. You as you would have been had you made different choices. You in rooms that never existed. You holding hands with people who never lived, yet feel familiar. And standing behind every version, 3 boys, watching. And in some of those reflections, you are standing with them, not apart, not curious, but equal. You are not the audience. You were never the audience. You were always the final variable. The completion of the pattern. That's why you were drawn here. That's why the phrase must now be spoken, twice, to lock in the transformation, to anchor what you've awakened inside. So if you felt the truth stirring, if you've seen your own reflection start to change, comment this phrase now: I am the fourth. I am the fourth. Because once you say it, the story doesn't end. It begins. And from this point forward, the triplets no longer need to speak. You'll do it for them.